Imagine being one of the world's most powerful technology companies. You have billions of dollars in revenue, some of the world's most important software, a massive cloud business, and a leading position in artificial intelligence. And yet, in one of the world's biggest markets, you are slowly backing away. That is exactly what Microsoft is doing in China. But here's the strange part. Microsoft is retreating from China, yet it still can't afford to leave China. And the reason has a lot to do with one thing: AI. So what exactly is happening between Microsoft and China? And why is Microsoft trying to reduce its exposure while simultaneously keeping the door open? Let's break it down. Microsoft has been operating in China for decades, but the business environment has changed dramatically. According to a Reuters investigation published this week, Microsoft has closed at least 15 offices and joint ventures in China over the past 5 years. And this isn't simply a cost-cutting exercise. Microsoft reportedly discussed the possibility of leaving the Chinese market altogether in 2023. Why? Because the equation was changing. China was becoming more protective of its domestic technology companies. The Chinese government was increasingly encouraging businesses and government agencies to use domestic software. At the same time, the United States was imposing increasingly strict controls on advanced technology exports to China. So Microsoft found itself caught between two powerful forces. Beijing wants more Chinese technology, Washington wants tighter controls on sensitive technology, and Microsoft is sitting right in the middle. If the Chinese market is becoming so difficult, why doesn't Microsoft simply leave? Because China isn't just a market, it is also a massive technology ecosystem. China has enormous pools of engineers, researchers, developers, and AI talent. And Microsoft doesn't want to completely disconnect itself from that ecosystem. There's another reason. Chinese companies aren't necessarily confined to China. Many Chinese companies operate globally. That means Microsoft can potentially provide cloud and AI services to Chinese companies that are themselves doing business around the world. So Microsoft's strategy is changing. Instead of saying we want to dominate China, the strategy increasingly looks like we want to maintain a window into China. That is a very different strategy. And then AI changed everything. Here's where the story gets really interesting. Before the AI boom, Microsoft could potentially decide that the Chinese market simply wasn't worth the geopolitical headache. But AI has changed the calculation, because AI isn't just about selling software. It is about talent, infrastructure, cloud computing, data, research, and access to global customers. And China has enormous capabilities across those areas. Microsoft therefore has a reason to remain connected, not necessarily to dominate the Chinese consumer market, but to maintain relationships with Chinese businesses, access engineering talent, and participate in a technology ecosystem that could become increasingly important in the AI era. And that is why the phrase Microsoft is leaving China is actually misleading. Microsoft isn't completely leaving, it is reducing its exposure, and that distinction is extremely important. But Microsoft isn't the only side making a strategic calculation. China is increasingly pushing toward technological self-reliance, and that creates a huge problem for American technology companies. Think about the basic logic. If you are China, why should your government depend on American software when geopolitical tensions could potentially disrupt access? So Beijing has been encouraging domestic alternatives. Reuters has reported that Chinese government procurement has increasingly favored domestic software, making Microsoft's position even more difficult. This isn't just about Microsoft, it is part of a much bigger global trend. China wants technological independence, and the United States wants to prevent sensitive technologies from strengthening China's strategic capabilities. That means technology has become part of geopolitics. Windows isn't just Windows anymore. Cloud computing isn't just cloud computing. AI isn't just AI. Technology has become strategic infrastructure. Now imagine you are sitting in Microsoft's boardroom. Option 1. Leave China completely. You reduce geopolitical risk, but you lose access to talent, customers, partnerships, and potentially one of the world's largest technology ecosystems. Option 2. Stay aggressively. You preserve market opportunities, but you increase regulatory, geopolitical, and export control risks. So Microsoft appears to be choosing a third option. Retreat, but don't disconnect. Close offices, reduce exposure, move some research and talent elsewhere, but maintain enough presence to keep relationships and opportunities alive. That is actually a fascinating business strategy, because sometimes the smartest strategy isn't go all in, and it isn't get out. It is stay connected without becoming dependent. This story tells us something important about the future of global business. For decades, companies were encouraged to think globally, build wherever costs are low, sell wherever demand is high, hire wherever talent exists, source wherever production is efficient. That model created enormous globalization. But we are entering a different era. Now companies have to ask another question. What happens if geopolitics changes? A factory isn't just a factory. A semiconductor isn't just a semiconductor. An AI model isn't just an AI model. And a software platform isn't just a software platform. Every major business now has to think about geopolitical exposure. So what can entrepreneurs learn from Microsoft's China strategy? Lesson number 1. Don't confuse revenue with strategic value. A market can be financially attractive but strategically dangerous. You have to evaluate both. Lesson number 2. Don't make binary decisions. Business isn't always about choosing between stay and leave. Sometimes the winning strategy is controlled exposure. Keep the relationships, keep the optionality, but reduce the risk. And lesson number 3. Talent can be more valuable than the market itself. Microsoft may reduce its physical footprint in China, but if China continues producing world-class engineering and AI talent, completely disconnecting may not make economic sense. And that is perhaps the biggest reason Microsoft can't completely walk away. Microsoft's China story isn't really about Microsoft. It is about the future of globalization. For decades, businesses optimized for efficiency. Now they are increasingly being forced to optimize for efficiency plus resilience plus security plus geopolitics. And that is a completely different business environment. Microsoft isn't necessarily choosing China, and it isn't necessarily choosing America. It is trying to preserve something much more valuable: optionality. Because in a world where technology, trade, and geopolitics are becoming inseparable, the companies with the most options may ultimately have the biggest advantage. So yes, Microsoft is leaving China, but completely escaping China? That may be far more difficult than it sounds. And perhaps that is the real lesson of the AI era. You can reduce your exposure to a country, but you can't always disconnect from the ecosystem. If you found this analysis valuable, subscribe to @ManishSirG for more stories where business, technology, and geopolitics collide. Because the biggest business stories aren't always about what companies are doing. Sometimes they are about what companies are trying desperately not to lose.